CFL 110, your weekly trip around the biggest stories in the Canadian Football League with Jeff Hamilton and Andrew Hustler Paterson.
What's going on, CFL fans? Welcome to another edition of CFL 110 here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk channel. Great to have you with us, and we've got lots to get to. 4 big games in the Canadian Football League to look back on, and another big slate of games as we get closer to Labor Day and the stretch drive in the CFL. Big thanks to our sponsors over at Coolbet Canada. The lines are up. We will hit the lines and make our picks for the week in the second half of the program. But I do want to remind you, especially those of you in the Winnipeg area, Bomber fans and Rider fans as well, if you'd like to enter Friday, we are doing the draw for the Labor Day trip package courtesy of Coolbet. What you're going to need to do at some point over the course of the next week before Thursday is make a $10 bet over at Coolbet. Take a screenshot of it and then send us that along with your Coolbet user ID and your contact info to contest@winnipegsportstalk.com. Everybody that enters will get a marble. We'll do a special marble race at the end of Friday's edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk, and somebody will be coming with us and the 1930 crew on an amazing weekend in Regina, including travel from Winnipeg to Regina, 2 nights hotel. We've got a great downtown spot close to all the action. We've got a dinner for everyone that's taken care of on the Saturday night, a swag bag, some other treats, of course, tickets to the game, and transportation to and from Mosaic Stadium. So, again, any $10 bet at Coolbet, screen cap it, send it in to contest@winnipegsportstalk.com, and join us on Friday's show just after 3 p.m. Central Time. Let's get going, and welcome back my tag team partner on all things 3 Downs, Jeff Hamilton. Hammer, what's good, buddy? How are you?
Haas, feeling good. Just finished a weekend at Hecla Resort where me and 24 buddies played 3 rounds of golf, mixed in some CFL action with that. Certainly had some feelings amongst my friends with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers game, but yeah, it's just an excellent weekend. And I have to say something, Haas. I've been to the last 10 Labor Day Classics, my friend, and they are always a good time. So if I have to add on to that promotion, get your ballots in, if you will, in the form of that $10 bet, because you will be missing out on what is one of the more fun, if not the most fun weekends outside of the Grey Cup that the CFL slate has to offer.
I always say Grey Cup weekend and Labor Day weekend in Regina. If you can't have fun there, check your pulse, or it's probably a you problem. So, yeah, would love to see some folks get in on that and take you with us. Contest@winnipegsportstalk.com. Listen, just before we get to the games on the weekend and look ahead to the upcoming weekend's action in the CFL, some interesting news at the end of last week in regards to next year's World Cup. Of course, the FIFA World Cup is coming to Canada, and BMO Field is going to be used for one of the biggest events on the planet for a significant period of time, which means the Argos need to find somewhere to play. And it was announced last week, Jeff, that the Argos would be playing 3 home games on the road. Not surprising, those games are in Winnipeg, Regina, and Hamilton against the Tiger Cats. Now, the Hamilton one makes a little sense. Argo fans can get there. But there's been a lot of discussion, and Luke Wilson was pretty outspoken on this, that this is a huge missed opportunity to try to grow the game, also grow the Argos fan base. God knows they could use it within the Ontario market, whether you're going to a place like London, what Luke brought up, or somewhere else in the province. I get it. From a financial perspective, I'm sure they'll make more money having an extra house in Winnipeg and in Regina and in Saskatchewan. But at the same time, it does feel like a little bit of a missed opportunity. And frankly, it kind of feels like the Argos, despite being the defending Grey Cup champs, are being treated kind of like second-class citizens. There's a lot that goes into the World Cup. We understand they can't play it. But what are your thoughts? Is this just a simple financial decision by a league that really needs the money, or was this something that they could easily do and are overlooking a real opportunity for the Argos franchise in the CFL in Ontario?
I want to address one thing before I even answer that question. Is I think the game, well, it makes the most logistical sense as far as a geographical standpoint. I think the game in Hamilton is bananas. Like this idea that this is your home game against your rival. Like
maybe they could give the Toronto fans the tickets first, or something like that.
Maybe that would be
at least they can
somewhat
get
of an equal. But to your point, at least they can get there. So I can concede on that. I just think it's wild. To me, Huss, this is pretty simple explanation. I see this as, MLSE or who owns the Argos now officially? They don't even they own them full on now still. Yeah, that's the relationship. Okay, well, MLSE, we know that they're a little bit of the, I don't know how you want to call it, maybe the pain in the side for the Canadian Football League when it comes to schedule making, because as we've known for years here, this organization gives exactly 9 dates essentially to the league schedule maker for when they want their home games. And this relationship with Toronto, we know the ownership, MLSE coming in, they got a lot of power, a lot of influence, probably don't need the Argos under their sports portfolio, but have them there. Don't necessarily treat them, or don't at all treat them like their other properties, right? So I see this as a option that is the cheapest. Might even mean more money for MLSE, because I think a lot of the criticism, Huss, is why aren't you doing it in London, Ontario? Why aren't you doing it maybe in Guelph or other established kind of places in the country, in the province of Ontario that might not have that don't ever get that opportunity to see CFL games, at least not in their hometown. And I argue that's probably not going to happen, Huss, because it would take a significant investment. It would take planning. It would take, it might even be a logistical nightmare as far as execution, right? And working and all that. So I don't necessarily blame MLSE that they just haven't picked up their CFL games and gone to a smaller community. Those would be very difficult operations, I think, to happen. Whether that's, and I think you had a suggestion too, even maybe Quebec City.
Well, let me get into that right now, because listen, the CFL has been for years putting on the Atlantic Canada game, which is a great idea. They've never been able to get the traction on a new stadium, and it seems like things have really stalled at the potentially of adding that 10th team. I've been saying for the last year that if the Canadian Football League wants to expand, which they obviously do to get to an even 10 teams in the league, the place that they should be looking at is Quebec City. Quebec, in the last 25 years, the growth of football has been significant in Quebec, I think more so than anywhere else in the country. And you look at their college or the university program, the Laval Rouge et Or, who are an absolute powerhouse and seem to be in the championship repeatedly. If not, they're contending, and they have incredible support. They've got a 12,000 seat facility there. Maybe you could add an extra 2,000 or 3,000 seats. But why not take the Argos and let them have at least some sort of a pseudo home field advantage as the home team, connect there. The gain for the Canadian Football League would be huge. And maybe you just do it once, and then you have another Ontario game, whether it's London or whether it's Guelph. I just think this is a big missed opportunity in the short term for the Argos in that Ontario market. But for the CFL, who has been desperately looking for a way to gain momentum towards getting a 10th team, it's shocking to me that we don't hear more discussion about potentially doing a game or a couple games in Quebec City. Maybe you have the Alouettes in it and it's still a pseudo neutral site game. Bottom line is, it's certainly not going to be anything like the Argos playing a home game at Princess Auto Stadium or at Mosaic Stadium against the Bombers or Riders.
And to that point, I think it just cements that this is the cheapest and easiest way, right? I mean, to your point, I think they, maybe they could have done one. I'm not going to hold it against them that they didn't do 3 kind of like Atlantic Canada showdowns like they've done in the past, but maybe one would be good. I think the issue here too, and not to just drag on them, is there's a certain standard the CFL has to uphold, right? And that's for the players too. That's not just for the fans and growing the PA needs to sign off. The facilities need to be appropriate. The hotels need to be appropriate up to CFL standards. So maybe that's part of the issue too. But I mean, you look at that fan base, you look at the comments that are made from media, from just the general public. It's just not a good look. And it really, I do think, I'm not as passionate about it. I don't hate it. I don't, I kind of get it covering this league for a decade. But if there's anything that I would say, it's that I feel for the Argo fans, because I know they don't get a ton of fans necessarily out to the games, but they have a passionate fan base. I've been there, seen games live, several occasions, and the people that show up do actually show out. So in that regard, I do think it's a little bit of a piss off. And depending on how the Argos do this year, Huss, they look like they're gonna be in bounce back mode next season. And if they fall off the map this year, they're gonna be behind the 8 ball next year, having, instead of what would be typically 9 home games, they would have 6, making that 12 out of their stadium games, which just seems to me like such a competitive disadvantage for a club. But again, it goes back to an organization, a group of owners that I think in this case would have been, full on for this option and are happy it's happening.
If I'm a player in the Argo room and I hear this news, I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? I mean, come on. I mean, winning football games at a professional level is tough enough. Putting us on the road into 3 of the most well-supported stadiums to play a home game is not something that's even close to on an even level. And as I say, from my perspective, a huge opportunity to get to a place like Quebec City in particular with a neutral site game, and maybe somewhere else in Ontario to try to help the Argo brand move forward heading into the post-World Cup time in 2026 and in 2027.
Just a final thing. I know we've been on this. Do we know anything about whether they get the home facilities in these stadiums? Because that will be interesting. Obviously not. So again, it's just another example.
You think the Bombers are moving to the visitor room?
Of course not. I just mean that, of course not. But that's what I mean. It's just another disadvantage on what just seems like a series of them. But let's move on. Enough of the Argos
in a minute.
Chaos.
Let's get back to last week's games, and very, very important game for Winnipeg and Ottawa on Thursday night. A 10th straight sellout at Princess Auto Stadium. Amazing crowd, beautiful evening, and a game that the Bombers look to have in hand. Drew Brown goes down in the second half, and then Hammer, we were on the verge of the Crumback 2.0. Interesting management by the Bombers. They had a 2nd and 3. They bring Chris Streveler out for a sneak, which is stuffed. And on a 3rd and 2, they send Sergio Castillo out, who has been the best long-distance kicker ever in the Canadian Football League, who misses a 57-yarder. The next thing you know, Khalil Pimpleton's bringing it back to the house. And a game that was 14-point deficit at the 3-minute warning is all of a sudden tied. Zach Caleros followed it up with a pick. Bomber defense, though, stepped up when they needed it. A 2-and-out. They get it back. Sergio walks it off, and the Bombers win by 3. It was a wild game, a very, very tough loss for Ottawa, losing your starting quarterback and losing the game in that fashion. For the Bombers, they did what they had to do to get a win, and you started to see some improvement, I would say, from areas of the defense that have really been taxed, particularly the secondary. And the offense, when they needed it, looked as maybe as good as it had at any point in the final minute leading to that drive. It wasn't pretty. The Bombers get it done, and now Ottawa in a really, really tough spot. We've been talking about the crossover. BC wins. We'll get to that in a minute. So does Winnipeg. And now we're very much looking like a crossover is in play right now. But Bombers at 5-4. Interesting. Last year they made it to the Grey Cup. They won the West. They were 3-6 through 9 games. They're 5-4 right now, but it certainly hasn't felt like the last 5 years in Winnipeg up until this point.
Well, it just feels like they're doing their best to blow it, right? Whether that's the offense just turning things off in the second half, whether it's the defense not being able to put the lid on things. I thought this particular game was interesting, Huss. As I mentioned, I was out in Hecla with my friends, and when Khalil Pimpleton brought back that ball, everybody was just staring at me, angry, asking me what the Bombers are doing this season. And I mean, I had no answers for them, because it's just, you don't, I mean, I get the attempt at the field goal, kind of, right? I understood the 63-yarder before that against Calgary to go ahead, but this one, you're up a touchdown, right? You're up against Dustin Crum, not Drew Brown, who's going to, and I know Dustin Crum was playing pretty decent and moving the ball and was able to obviously get them, within striking distance before Khalil Pimpleton made it an even score. But you got to trust your defense there, right? Because, as clutch as Sergio Castillo is and has been this year, and as big a leg he has, he still misses kicks here and there. And everybody knows that the most vulnerable you'll put your team in any situation is a missed field goal because of the players you have out there, right?
Especially a long one.
A long one, like exactly. It allows you to identify holes, and Khalil Pimpleton has made a name for himself for being that dynamic runner and the ability to go east-west as quickly as he goes north-south. So, that to me it was the play before that. To me, it's you bring out the short yardage for 2 attempts and you only go for 1 and then you kick this field goal. Like, to me, it's go for that and seal the game or kick the ball deep, get a directional punt.
I hated the decision to bring Streveler in on the third and the 2nd and 3 to begin with. Have the ball in your quarterback's hands, give it to Brady Oliveira, and allow yourself options. And if you don't get it, you throw Sergio out there. I mean, they put all their cards on the table. Ottawa knew what was coming. They did everything they could to stop it. They did a good job, and they forced a 57-yarder, and we saw what happened. I have a feeling that one, whether the coaching staff or not would admit it afterwards, there was probably some, maybe given the opportunity to do that again, we might handle things a little differently.
Well, and here's the thing. After you didn't punt it and put the game on the defense's hands, they took over and forced a 2-and-out after Zach Collaros' interception, giving the Bombers the chance to get the win back. To me, it just feels, I've talked to players in the locker room and I've talked to a number of veterans who say it just feels different this year. And that's not just the play of the players. That's the decisions of the coaching staff here. And it's putting each game in danger in some respects. So, credit to getting the victory, but that was the whole topic of the conversation at Bombers practice today when Jason Hogan spoke. It was all breaking down who makes the final decisions. How do you go through and make these decisions? And Mike O'Shea is the one who gets the final decision. And when you ask Jason Hogan if he learns from these things like Mike learns from these things, I asked specifically, well, you'll never convince Mike O'Shea that he shouldn't do the same play again. I asked Jason Hogan about how he learns that, and he went full-on politician and said, whatever Mike O'Shea does, he does for the intentions of the team, and I give my complete 100% behind it.
Well, I get it. Listen, they're making decisions because they're trying to win the game. You just don't have to necessarily agree with them, and it gives guys like us the opportunity to Monday morning quarterback the hell out of decisions that end up the
I'm just
way
worried
that the
about
end of the
Winnipeg Blue
game
Bombers fans' heartbeats here, man. I don't know. If they're so used to winning, they can't be going through this every week.
I was in the end zone in 141 for the game, and after that happened, you could have heard a pin drop minus a few expletives that were being thrown around the section. It was
only imagine.
It was something, but again, smiles on the faces of everyone as they left the building as Sergio Castillo got another chance and the Bombers walked it off. One other quick Bomber note, and when we talked about how decimated the secondary had been, Bridges was cut, Bonds out for the season. They are getting some help, and Deario Houston signed, a former Bomber, went to the Grey Cup with this team recently with Calgary, had some off-field issues as far as the domestic violence policy. His charges were dismissed, and he was at practice today for the first time, Jeff, and I know Mike O'Shea spoke about that afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're going to, given the circumstances of his signing, he had, for those who aren't aware, it was in November, an incident occurred with him and his wife where he was charged with domestic violence for an altercation that apparently involved him hitting her with a suitcase. Well, that was in November. Charges were laid, I believe a month or so later, and then dropped in March. So, and the CFL went through their gender violence policy and gender-based violence policy, and to be honest with you, they did exactly the way they're supposed to. And what my account, Huss, is the very first time they actually did things the way they're supposed to. And that is, this is a policy built on rehabilitation and education. It's not built on what you would be led to believe in previous instances, where it's a zero tolerance policy. In fact, when I actually dove deep into this policy was way back when they invited Johnny Manziel into the CFL. And so I called the domestic violence experts across the country that the CFL leans on for this policy, a policy, I'll remind viewers, that was being heralded as groundbreaking and progressive and all those things under the former commissioner, Jeffrey Orridge. Well, that all includes meeting with the player, talking about the situation in this case, and I would say critically, Haas, is involving the victim of the supposed crime or the supposed situation. So and that occurred. They dealt with the victim through this. She was part of the process. Deario went through several counseling sessions. Had certain conditions he needed to complete, and according to the CFL, is under ongoing monitoring. So in this case, with the charges being dropped, I do believe in second chances. I do believe in having him learn from his mistakes and giving him the opportunity to earn a paycheck. Obviously, it's I certainly don't agree with the actions, and my work outside of football certainly says as much. So I think that at this point in time, they're being supported by the Bombers. I know Deario appreciates being in a city where he's where he's cared about. A lot of players care about them. They care about his wife. They care about his kids. So we're hoping this is a good redemption story here in an otherwise pretty crappy situation that Deario put himself in.
Yeah, we'll see whether he's a possibility for this weekend. If not, I would expect him to be playing for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at the latest in the Labor Day Classic against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Yeah. We said it last week on CFL 110. Friday night was a loser leaves town match. The Edmonton Elks, the Toronto Argonauts, both 2-win teams. Arbuckle and Cody Fajardo went head-to-head, and the Edmonton Elks, the big fourth quarter, end up getting a win they so desperately needed. We've got a winning streak in Edmonton right now, and they've got Ottawa this week. And poor Nick Arbuckle, the guy throws 42 times, completes 30 for nearly 400 yards, 382 and a touchdown. It still wasn't enough as the Elks get that big win. And at this point, Jeff, I know it's not Labor Day, and everyone says the season doesn't start till Labor Day. I got bad news if you're an Argos fan. It does seem like it's probably on to next year and 6 home games, as we mentioned before. Elks have some life, thanks to Cody Fajardo.
They have some life. The unfortunate part, they're in the West Division. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers won, and we'll get to the BC Lions, but they also won. And so it's going to be an uphill battle for them for sure. The crossover, as you mentioned in the last segment, Huss, I feel is very much in play here. So that puts the Argos in a horrible position. The other part, too, you mentioned, I feel sorry for Nick Arbuckle in a lot of ways. I think that was a career high, 382 yards. And they had 5 trips to the red zone and scored 1 touchdown. Of course, that fumble that Fajardo had that ultimately led to Cody Fajardo's return, touchdown that took the lead and kept the Elks up for good. That's just bad execution, a little bit of bad luck, and that's been kind of the story of the Argos all season. You've seen it all over head coach Ryan Dinwiddie's face. This is just a year that's not going well for this team. And even to the point, Haas, where I almost think you probably sit Chad Kelly out for the rest of the season. That's how bad the Argos are right now, because I don't know if you want to risk bringing him back if he's not fully healthy and for what, right? So, but switching over to the Elks, it's a good story, Huss, but this has kind of been the Elks the last couple seasons. By around week 11, they played desperate football. This might be a little bit earlier than previous years, but they played desperate football, put together a run, and then putter out at the end. And I just have this feeling, I hope they can make it, a tight battle in the West, but it will take a lot, including beating those teams in the West. And I just, you look at how desperate Winnipeg's going to be. You know how well BC's been playing. You look how dominant Saskatchewan is, and I don't think anybody has Calgary losing to them. It's going to be an uphill battle to decrease some of that space in the standings in their own division. You can beat the West teams all you want, you can beat the East teams all you want. You need to start getting wins from the teams that are in your division.
Well, listen, there's no doubt about that. You do wonder if Julian Grant had just hung on to that ball against the Ticats and they got that win, or maybe they decided to go to Trey Ford a little earlier if this team wouldn't be in it. But again, they've got 3 wins right now. BC and Winnipeg both have 5. They got to catch at least one of them and have a better record than both Toronto and Ottawa in the West. And they'll have it in the East, I should say, and they'll have a big opportunity coming up this week when we get to this week's games. 2 teams that aren't worrying about the crossover right now went at it in Mosaic on Saturday. It was the Hamilton Tiger Cats going in to play the Saskatchewan Roughriders, first in the East versus first in the West. I don't want to say this was no contest because Hamilton was in the football game, but this was a full, complete performance by the Saskatchewan Roughriders outside of potentially a kicker who continues to struggle. Trevor Harris getting out the football so quickly, only sacked once. Meanwhile, Bo Levi Mitchell trying to find receivers, trying to make plays, sacked 6 times in the game and unable to get it into the end zone. Bo's numbers against everybody that aren't Saskatchewan this year have been phenomenal. Very pedestrian against the Riders, who continue to plant their flag at the top of the CFL power poll.
No disrespect to the Ticats. What we've seen from them has been exciting, particularly on offense, particularly with Bo Levi Mitchell, who's leading that number 1 group. But the Riders have looked more for real in execution in almost all their games, right? I mean, you look at Hamilton and they couldn't get it done. Was it last week they fell just short, right, to the BC Lions? Before that, it was just winning in the last minute against teams, right? So it was exciting football. It was a cool brand. It led to really, really exciting post-game press conferences and guys, getting excited about what they're doing there, but it was close and tight games. And I just had this feeling that Saskatchewan was going to lay the boots to them. And I'm not looking to make excuses for the Ticats. They've had a pretty difficult travel schedule, and it feels like this is the game that caught up to them. You mentioned the kicking game for Huss. It was 29-9 was the final, I think was the end score there. They missed 3 field goals, which would have been 38-9, which seems even more convincing. So I think, I'm getting these strong Bomber feelings. I know I've said this in previous shows and how they've spoken to media and how they've handled and conducted themselves week to week, that whole 1-0 mantra, that whole, whatever, kind of big and boring, right? But that kicking game, like when games come down to it and you need a kicker to come through and every one of your phases seems locked in, because that's the situation right now, Huss, in Saskatchewan. The offense is locked in with Trevor Harris, who doesn't even have his top 3 receivers yet. The defense is locked in and have been for much of the season. And now you have a special teams that's mostly locked in. You have a good return game, but you have a kicking game that is just... I just hope it doesn't prove to be your Achilles heel, because that's the worst way to lose games, is not having a kicker. Brett Lothar, I will say this, Huss, as his defense, it was exactly a year before, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 days off, that he missed 4 field goals against Montreal and what turned out to be a 3-point loss for the Riders. Everybody was up in arms. Everybody wanted him gone. And what did he do? He nailed every single field goal from then on. I believe it was 23 for 23 during the regular season, and another 5 for 5 through the West semi and final. So I know that the Riders are not going to be looking for changing things up here, given that. But I think this is going to be top of mind for Corey Mace, and probably even more so for Jeremy O'Day, to monitor this situation, because as much as Brett Lothar is liked in Riderville, particularly amongst his teammates, you need to have a kicker in these tight games come playoffs, especially when the weather dips and games are tighter, they're played tighter, and the margin for victory is smaller. You need that sure boot. You can't have a guy who's missing. So it'll be an interesting storyline. Storyline of following Brett Lothar and his ability to make field goals.
Well, they're doing pretty much everything else right now. The class of the league, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, at this point in the season. And of course, we do have the big home and home just after this weekend with the Labor Day Classic and the rematch between the Prairie Rivals, the Bombers and Riders, in the Banjo Bowl. Final game of the week was the BC Lions and the Montreal Alouettes. This game went from 4.5 to 7 on the point spread, knowing the quarterback situation for Montreal. And it went from bad to worse early in the game when Caleb Evans went down relatively early in the first half, paving the way for James Morgan. Hand up if you had ever heard of James Morgan before last weekend in the Canadian Football League. Probably not. Now, listen, he actually did acquit himself not too badly. 20 of 33 for 211 yards, a TD, and a pick. But this was once again Nathan Rourke's night. Rourke passes for nearly 400 yards, 26 of 34 for 382, 4 touchdowns. And something tells me that 11-1 on Rourke at Coolbet for the MOP will no longer be available because he's heating up. The BC Lions offense is heating up, and it really does seem like they're growing under Buck Pierce. We'll find out as we get closer to game time what the quarterback situation for Montreal looks like in the Thursday game against Winnipeg. But for right now, BC getting some momentum. And as I said last week, I'm buying the BC Lions in the second half of this season. I think there's a lot more work for them to be done. I see the improvements. And most importantly, I see an incredibly talented quarterback, Nathan Rourke, getting a lot more comfortable with the offense and his teammates.
That right there. And I think Buck Pierce, to his credit, has brought the best out of Nathan Rourke. And I know that's saying something given his 2022 season. I'm not saying he's there yet, but I think he's getting there with this offense. And why I give Buck Pierce so much credit is he's brought a running game to BC. Right? James Butler is continuing to chew up yards. He's part of the short passing game. He's part of the run game. He is creating options to open up some of those deep passes, and that's when Nathan Rourke is most dangerous. Keon Hatcher knows that better than anybody. What was that, Huss? 11 for 11 for 156 that put him into the
2 TDs as well.
2 TDs as well that put him into the lead for CFL receiving. So to me, I think this is all just rolling well. And I'm going to steal something that, we were speaking to Jason Hogan, Bombers OC this morning, about the importance of complementary football. And that is what we're seeing from the BC Lions, not just within their phases as the run game and the passing game get going, their defense is improving. We were knocking the Lions defense for a long time, and they've started to find their game. They've started to execute. And when you're playing complementary football, you start feeling good. That win over Hamilton, Huss, was so important for the BC Lions. They needed that so bad for their confidence, for their, just to see that the work they're putting in and week out. I go back to that post-game video from that victory. You could feel it. And so this team's feeling it. Confidence is a dangerous thing. That's why I worry for those Elks fans, Huss. I just don't see the Lions slowing down, and I don't see Winnipeg giving up. But it's going to be a fascinating second half for BC. This is a team that, as I mentioned, Buck Pierce has brought in a bit of a new, certainly a new culture, has brought in different players. They shed some guys from last year. So there was going to always be growing pains as more players learn their system. So we're starting to see that in play. You have a competitor in Nathan Rourke, and I think you have a real chance to fight for that second spot, that home spot, and maybe even fight with Saskatchewan, assuming they can go on another 7-game losing streak. That's probably not going to happen here, Huss, but the wild, wild West is arguably as wild as it's been in 10 years.
Well, and as strong as it's been. The West sweeps the East last week. So, as we go in, the only really change is that Calgary had to sit back and watch it all. Saskatchewan's at 8-1, Calgary's at 6-3, Winnipeg at 5-4. BC's played the extra game; they're at 5-5, and the Elks, on the back of 2 wins, are now 3-6 and feeling a little frisky. Meanwhile, in the East, Hamilton 6-4. They played a lot of football going into that game last week. They now get their bye. Montreal 5-5, still, despite this skid they're on without Davis Alexander, 2 games up on Ottawa, who's 3-7, and Toronto in the basement of the league at 2-8. Which brings us to our picks for this week. Go to coolbet.com. You can check out all the lines, some of the best odds around. And of course, if you haven't played there before, use that promo code WST for a 100% on your first deposit up to $200. We'll double it. And if you're making any bets this week, screen cap it, particularly those people in Winnipeg. Send it in to contest@winnipegsportstalk.com. Any bet of $10 or more, any sport, along with your Coolbet username, your phone number so we can call you if you win. Friday, we'll be giving away that trip to the Labor Day Classic with the 1930 crew from Winnipeg to Regina. Bombers right back at it. Another Thursday game. They take on Montreal. The line on this one, Jeff, is Bombers -4.5. Now, you would think that with the season the Bombers had and these close calls they've had, even in their wins, they wouldn't be a significant favorite, but no one knows who James Morgan is. The Alouettes have significant quarterback issues. This would not be the case if Davis Alexander was in, but the Bombers, 4.5-point favorites against Montreal. I mean, I'm looking at this game and I think the Bombers should win this game. The Bombers have to find a way to win this game. But this is a team that never makes it easy. They've had a tough time traveling over to Montreal. Montreal's given them a hard time. Jason Moss knows this team very well. I'm having a harder time laying the 4.5, even with the questionable quarterback room, which is, in all likelihood, with Caleb Evans out, it's going to be Morgan and the recently signed Chad Dukes.
Cameron Dukes.
You
mixed Chad
Dukes.
Kelly and Dukes together. Nice.
So here we go. Bombers -4.5. Do they put together a complete performance and cover the 4.5, or is this going to be another tight game where the underdog is the play?
Question's going to be if this offense on Winnipeg can figure it out in the final two quarters, Huss, because that just seems to be the issue here. It's not the issue isn't building up a lead for halftime. The issue is finishing off games. So, you look at 4.5 points and doesn't seem like a lot. It's just a couple more than a field goal against the Montreal Alouettes team, as you mentioned, is being led by James Morgan, a relatively unknown dude, despite being on a handful of NFL rosters in recent years and playing in the USFL. I don't think he's, and Mike O'Shea said it today, he doesn't consider him a rookie in the sense of he doesn't have any, pro experience. He certainly does. Now, he doesn't have a ton of games under his belt per se, but he does have that experience. We'll see, and especially what we saw him do in spot duty. He wasn't horrible. To me, I'm just so conflicted with this. I've always been a big fan of Jason Moss as a coach. I just don't know about these points, and for that reason, I'm going to take the team that gets them, not has to cover them. And in this case, maybe this is the game. Maybe it's my picks, Huss, that's been holding back the Bombers here, because I have been taking them when they've had 4.5-point edges, edges that maybe they weren't deserving of. And as you've mentioned in previous pods, a little bit of that maybe, that bump for how well they've done in their last 5 seasons. So I'm not loving this at all. I probably won't touch it when it comes to making bets. But at this point, I'm kind of sticking with Montreal at 4.5 and thinking this might be a close game.
Yeah, listen, I think gun to my head, I'm the same way. I mean, I think when we put together our parlay, it'll probably be the final 3 games, because this is a tough one. I mean, I expect the Bombers to win. I've been expecting more from the Bombers lately. It'll be very interesting to see if Dalton Schoen returns, who was in practice on Monday, which was a very nice development. He's still in the 6th game. He could come off a game early and potentially play. But man, I mean, the Montreal defense is good. Jason Moss knows how to cook up a game plan to get the most. And Morgan will presumably have first-team reps for the first time all week long. So I don't think the Bombers are just going to go in there and win by showing up. And it wouldn't surprise me if this was a really close game. I'm going to say what I said last week, which actually did come true, although it really shouldn't have. I still maintain you were on the right side of that game despite not winning it. Is the Bombers win, but this is a close one. So I will take the 4.5 as well for Montreal as a home dog. And hopefully from a Bomber perspective, it won't be too stressful, but I kind of expect it will be. Moving on.
They haven't made things easy, Huss. Why are we suggesting they'll do that on the road in Montreal? Everyone knows the Montreal curse. Took a miracle the last time they won there.
If last week was a loser leaves town match between Edmonton and Toronto, Edmonton survived, and now it's Edmonton versus Ottawa. An absolutely massive game when it comes to the crossover. And ironically, Winnipeg and BC might actually be pulling for Edmonton to make sure that Ottawa gets that extra loss and makes the crossover more likely. This is a pick'em right now. It's been -110 all day. It's now moved slightly to Edmonton, but essentially 1-point favorites, reverse number, or just do it. Let's play this as a pick 'em. Who wins the loser leaves town match, and who is going into Labor Day with very, very slim playoff hopes?
I'm going with Edmonton. I think I'm riding the Elks train, as I mentioned before this. This is something that Edmonton does when they pick up steam after a horrible start. They become desperate and they make it interesting. I'm not just doing it because of their momentum they built up. I'm doing it because I don't think Drew Brown's going to be in the lineup. I don't think that injury was a good one. I wouldn't expect him at practice this week. I wouldn't expect him playing this week. I don't know that to be sure. It's one of those, lower body injuries that you just don't bounce back. If you don't come back in the game, then you don't probably come back that next week. And so for that reason, I'm going to go with Edmonton. Edmonton is on the road here, right? But they need this. Like, Ottawa needs this obviously too, but Edmonton desperately needs it being in the West. And I think because of what we've seen the last 2 weeks from them, because we've seen that resilience come up with big plays, Cody Fajardo leading his team. I'm still riding the Fajardo train right now. I'm going to go with Edmonton. It's not one that I'm incredibly confident with, but I do like the momentum they built up, and I do think that while Dustin Crum looked pretty decent in relief duty last game, I just don't see an Ottawa team led by anyone outside of Drew Brown being all that competitive.
You know what? I'm with you on this game, and listen, maybe it's that I just was I'm forced to believe in the Elks after they spoiled my Argos bet in what would have been a perfect 4-0 week last week against the spread in the CFL. But listen, I'm really impressed with what Cody Fajardo is doing. He is bringing a certain level of energy to that team. And here's the other thing, and I talked about this with Nielsen today in the lock shop. The fact that they're actually able to move the chains to stay on the football field, even when they're not scoring, is helping the defense in a big way. Like, I know we were all shitting on their defense, but they were out there nonstop, it seemed, early on, and at some point it was going to break. And with the increased ball control and offensive performance, they're giving their defense a better chance to go out there and make plays of their own. And you've seen those points against drop from the 30s to the high 20s to 20 last week. I think they're in a really good place. And to your point, this would not be an easy pick if Drew Brown was in it. I think I'd probably lean Ottawa with the home field advantage. But in this case, assuming that it's going to be Dustin Crum against anyone other than the Bombers, I'll ride with Fajardo and the Elks to make it 3 in a row and get to 4 wins on the season. Next up, we've got BC and Toronto. And we were just talking about BC, how good Nathan Rourke feels lately. They seem to be trending upwards, while the Argos are just mired at the bottom of the standings. I really thought that if the Argos were going to have any chance of turning their season around, last weekend was a must-win, and they did not get it done. To add to things, we'll wait to see his status for this week, but arguably the number 2 receiver in the league behind Kenny Lawler, DeMonte Coxey, got hurt and left late in the fourth quarter. That would be a devastating loss. And this team's losing even when Nick Arbuckle is playing the way he is right now. I don't think there's another gear from their quarterback or their offense. So to me, this is Nathan Rourke time. And at 3.5 with the spread, I will be more than happy to lay those points right now. I think this gets closer to maybe 6 by the time they go off. So I'm getting in today. I'm getting in today on the BC Lions at -3.5.
Run, don't walk to that spread. I was wondering, because I hadn't looked at that spread prior to this. I was wondering what was going to come out of your mouth, and I was thinking 5.5, 6 points, strictly on the basis that they were on the road. That 3-point pad, for the home team, and at 3.5 points, I just don't understand that. I mean, BC's been rolling. They're feeling good. They're knocking off teams that are solid, and here they're up against a Toronto team, and it's just 3.5 points. Maybe that's some Grey Cup, reigning Grey Cup champs benefit of the doubt here, because I see one team trending horribly the opposite direction than the other team in the BC Lions, who are getting things done and are getting, as you mentioned, the play from Nathan Rourke. As we were talking about before, that complementary run game and passing game. The defense is picking up the slack. They're just playing well, and to have 3.5 points, I'm all over BC. In fact, I want to stop talking, Huss, in case they change the spread before I'm done.
So we're both in on BC -3.5. The final matchup, Saturday night, 6 p.m. Central, 7 out East, is a matchup at the top of the West between the Calgary Stampeders at 6-3 and the Saskatchewan Roughriders going on the road at 8-1. This is a pick'em. -110 on the money line on one side, -110 on the other way. I'll start off with this one. I'm so excited about this game in that, these are the teams that the Bombers and Lions are chasing. Calgary has been an unbelievable story this year, unless you're a Bomber fan, handing them 3 losses. And we've talked about Saskatchewan. They just continue to play a well-rounded brand of football. Trevor Harris is feeling it right now in this defense, is the best in the Canadian Football League as well. Really juicy matchup. And of course, we remember the first matchup earlier this year, the one blemish on the Saskatchewan Roughriders card this year was a home loss, and a pretty convincing one at the hand of the Calgary Stampeders. Looking at this game, I feel like Saskatchewan is going to be ready for this game. And while Calgary, is in a situation where they're coming off the bye, they've had extensive time to prepare. I'm not sure that's enough for an angry Rider team that looks to avenge their lone loss of the year. I'm hoping this will be another great game and a much closer game than the one these two teams played earlier this year. But the way the Saskatchewan defense is playing, what Trevor Harris is doing at the helm of this Rider offense, unless it comes down to a late Brent Lauther field goal, I think I'm riding with the Riders to get to 9-1 before they're back-to-back against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Who you got?
I think when you're at 8-1, so you hit the midway mark of the season, you've only lost 1 game, whereas Calgary's lost 3. I think you have this confidence that you're going to go out and beat anybody. And I think when you look at the one game you lost to, and that's your next opponent, I think it becomes extra personal. This one to me, this is always tight games between these two clubs. It's probably why you see the spread the way it is, but I see Saskatchewan as being the real deal here. In fact, I see Saskatchewan overwhelming Vernon Adams Jr. in this game, to the point where, again, I do think there's something to be said, and you mentioned it, and that probably plays into the spread as well, is Calgary's a good team coming off the bye. Craig Dickinson is a good coach, right? They'll be rested. They'll be ready to go. They'll treat this game much like a playoff game, right? They also want to win first place in the West, and to drop this game at home to the team that's ahead of them will mean a lot. I just think this one is going to go down to the wire. I hope it doesn't go down to a Brett Lauther field goal, Huss, but I think it's going to be more so Calgary trying to claw their way back in this one. I just see too much strong play in all 3 phases for Saskatchewan outside of that kicking game. And I just think it's going to be too much. Calgary is a good team, but I'm still not convinced they're as good a team as Saskatchewan. They've been proving it week in and week out. When they go into games, they embarrass teams. So I don't think they're going to embarrass the Calgary Stampeders, but I do think they're going to put up a lead early on, and they're going to be able to ride their complementary football to a victory of more than 1 point. So I'm going to go with Saskatchewan as well. Yeah,
you know what? This is a big chance for Calgary to, make the most of their bye week. And I mean, listen, if they win this football game, they'll be 5-0 against the Riders and the Bombers on the season, which is very, very impressive. Even if they lose this game, I think they're still in a really good spot. I mean, they're the only team that's beaten Saskatchewan so far this year. Yeah. We'll see whether they can do it again. I, however, will be riding with the Riders, which I guess, listen, we're rolling with these last 3 games. Let's go Edmonton to win, Saskatchewan to win, BC -3.5. We'll fire that over to Patty and Jake, and we'll get it up in the combos for our CFL 110 boosted parlay, which you can get over at Coolbet. And I should say to everyone, you jumped in late, don't forget, if you are betting at Coolbet, any $10 bet, send a screen cap of it along with your Coolbet ID and your info to contest@winnipegsportstalk.com. We'll do a special marble race at the end of Friday's WST show to send somebody with us from Winnipeg to Regina for the Labor Day Classic. Fun show today, Hammer. And listen, one more week, and then we get to Labor Day, and very much looking forward to breaking it down with you next week before we get ready to head west for what is the most fun weekend of the Canadian Football League regular season.
Yeah, and it's been tilted towards Winnipeg's way the last little bit. I'm looking forward to Winnipeg coming in and being the underdogs, right? It's not a position they've really been much. I mean, I guess they're always kind of considered underdogs when it's against their biggest rival in the Saskatchewan Roughriders. But I do think that's going to take on a whole new meaning for this one, and the bragging rights just feel that much bigger this year. So I'm looking forward to that, but certainly looking forward to the slate of games first here. Looking forward to our picks. You were very hot last week, Huss, and you kind of got robbed there at the end. But I feel like we might be onto something this week. This week feels like the week.
I did have confidence despite the outcome of the Toronto-Edmonton game, and I did hammer a Jays, Lions, Riders spread parlay on Saturday. So we're in a good shape right now. And listen, for the Bombers and Riders, big road games to keep rolling and then get ready for the back-to-back beginning next week. We'll be all over Labor Day weekend in the Canadian Football League next week. Make sure to join us here on CFL 110. Huge thanks to our presenting sponsor, Coolbet. And of course, thanks to Michael Remus, the brains behind the operation, getting us on and off the air. For Jeff Hamilton, I'm Andrew Paterson. Enjoy the games this week, and we'll see you next week on CFL 110 on the road to Labor Day.
You've been listening to CFL 110. Tune in next week for more great Canadian football discussion.